Hey guys, it's Sunday. It's a little bit of a crazy Sunday because of daylight savings time, which I don't know about you, but it screws me up completely. I spend the entire day going, what time is it? And even though, fall back, you get that extra hour, it still just throws everything off schedule. So, anyways, hi, it's Sunday. It's story time, which is my favorite time of the week. And for those of you who also watch Spilling Ink, we didn't have a show this week because it fell on Halloween. And well, everyone's out doing stuff with their family. I don't know if you guys are trick or treating or not. We kind of had an indoor Halloween this year where we just got the kids their favorite buckets of candy and let them go to town while watching all kinds of spooky, scary Halloween movies. So it was fun for us. I hope you guys had a really good Halloween too, in whatever way that you decided to celebrate this year. I hope you guys are excited for story time this week because we're going to add a little extra this time. Normally, I only do one chapter, but because these two chapters really, really fit together, we're going to take a little extra time on it. So, oh, look at that. We've got somebody from Scotland. We're reaching Scotland. Yes. Hello. Thanks for watching. So, without further ado, I'm just going to jump right on into this so we can read the two chapters from today, A Weapon of Magical Destruction. This is book 1 in the Agents of A.S.S.E.T series. And for those of you who are new to the channel, all of the previous chapters are available for you to watch at my YouTube channel, youtube.com/KatieSlitis. So if you missed something, you can always go back and catch up on them. All right, let's get on to it. I'm excited. We're getting to some really fun parts of the book. My little bookmark from my son, as always. All right, here we go. Chapter 13. Clinging to Gray's back as he sped through the streets of Las Vegas on his motorcycle, she reminded herself that her mom had worked for A.S.S.E.T. She was heading towards knowledge and understanding, answers to all of the insanity, if they made it there alive. Wind whipped her hair into a frenzy, lashing her chin like a cat o' nine tails. Exposed to the elements, she could feel the dirt clinging to her skin. A thin film of grime had started to coat her arms, and sweat dried it on the air. She'd never ridden on a motorcycle before. Who would want to? Death traps. Gray had better be right about this whole immortality thing. Nothing separated her from a major case of road rash, or worse, if his insane weaving through traffic led them to an accident. She squeezed her eyes, excuse me, she squeezed her eyes shut and mumbled, magical immunity, magical immunity, magical immunity, as her mantra, as Gray brought them speeding down the thin line of traffic between cars stopped at an intersection. Tell me when we get there, she cringed and buried her face, closing her eyes as they narrowly missed rearview mirrors jutting out from cars. You sure you're really the daughter of Miranda Cynwrig? He taunted her with the question. Part of her wanted to lash out. He'd been nothing but a jerk since she met him. But it wouldn't really do her much good. She was stuck with him until they reached A.S.S.E.T. It was his job to bring her in. With luck, she'd be rid of him at that point. Though his mocking laughter and condescending tone deserved at least a good slap upside the head before they parted ways. Maybe after they parked. Sage smiled at the idea. They traveled, excuse me, they traveled down towards the center of downtown Las Vegas into an even tighter web of narrow and densely packed one-way streets. Before she could get her bearings, he turned into a parking garage and drove down into a basement-level space. Know where we are? Gray asked. Not really. I try my best to avoid this area. Rule number 1 when living in Las Vegas, avoid downtown and the Strip at all costs. The rest of the city was normal as they come, with the added perk of alcohol in every grocery store. Unless she was forced, Sage never went where the tourists were. And short of a few parking fines and jury duty, she stayed pretty far from the old casinos and the official city buildings. Something else you'll have to get used to then, he laughed, as if causing her any inconvenience was making his day better. Welcome to your new home. Who referred to work as home? She might agree to work downtown, but home was her comfortable apartment with Matt and probably Josh someday. He'd eventually have to move in because there was no way Sage was ever letting the best roommate in the world go. She stopped short and reached into her pockets, fishing for her phone. In all the commotion, she hadn't let Matt know what was going on. He'd be worried when he noticed she hadn't come home. But these weren't her normal jeans. She was still in the leather ensemble from dress-up night she'd never had the chance to change out of. Sage couldn't remember the last time she'd held her phone or her wallet. They could be anywhere, the bar, her hotel room, or Zach might have taken them during the hours of blacked out that left her a hole in her memory. Shit. You coming? Gray stopped short in front of a bank of elevators. Reality trumped Fantasyland. Reality trumped the Fantasyland that Sage was about to enter. Credit cards would have to be canceled. She'd just been laid off. How was she going to find money for a new phone? Shit! Stress riveted her in place. She'd have to get a new ID card, too. How exactly was she supposed to make time for all of this? What's wrong now? Sage groaned. My purse, my phone, my life? Panic sharpened her tone. Pick one. Check the saddlebags. He pointed back towards the motorcycle. And hurry. A small win. Her purse and wallet were there, as was her phone, although it was dead. Trivial things, but in her current state, they meant the world to her. She could breathe again and focus. Back in Phoenix, A.S.S.E.T had a gorgeous white high-rise flooded with light from every angle, the kind of place that felt welcoming and inviting, giving the illusion of transparency and truth. Little had she known what lay hidden in plain sight. This building gave no indication that it belonged to a company at all. No signs, no placards. Even the parking lot was bare of names for its employees. This is A.S.S.E.T, right? Sage asked, confused at the stark contrast to what she'd grown up with. Welcome to the Vegas branch. Yep. Gray led her into the elevator, and they rode all the way to the top floor, exiting to a great open space filled with offices and conference rooms to either side. A large reception desk stood sentry at the center of the lobby. Behind it, Sage saw hallways leading to more of the building. Back home, they had a lovely large cafeteria for employees and training rooms where she had watched her mother practice with the latest equipment. She'd loved seeing the dance of daggers, and even had been offered a chance to try her skill at knife throwing. For a kid, it was like a playground. Knowing better now, if this place housed the same spaces, it would be for serious work. A tiny girl with silvery blue hair sat at the large reception desk answering phones and jotting down notes. Too busy to give her a proper welcome, she smiled at Sage and Gray as they passed. People scurried around like little ants, busying themselves as they crossed the expanse of an open lobby space, traveling from office to office, paying little or no attention to either her or Gray. This way, he guided her towards one of the glass-enclosed offices that sat just beyond the reception desk. Inside, a fierce woman sat slaying the keys on her laptop, her turquoise eyes glued to the screen as if it held the secrets of life itself. Behind her, an impressive assortment of medieval-style weaponry had been mounted to the walls. Swords of folded steel were the first thing that caught her eye. Inlaid with patterns and magical symbols, they seemed to shimmer as they caught the light from the window. One had a crossguard so ornately decorated with gems, Sage knew it couldn't possibly ever be used for fighting. Just the kind of weapon her character would use on game night. If her phone hadn't died, she'd have taken a picture to show her RPG group. Magic users loved pretty shiny weapons, but used them more for decoration. It was the spells that did the damage when it came to dungeon raids. Sage's eyes darted all over the room, marveling at the vast array of pointy, shiny things. A great big warhammer, probably too heavy to mount, sat propped against the back corner of the office. All of it amounted to an impressive collection that she desperately wanted to reach out and touch. But, first impressions and all, Sage didn't dare reach a hand out. By the looks of the office, the lady busy at her computer was some kind of grand high muckety-muck, and with any luck and good behavior, Sage could earn a chance to play later. That was faster than we expected, the woman said, pointing over her computer screen to the seat opposite her desk. Her fingertips looked as if they'd been covered in lace or some form of tribal ink. Gray had said they were immortals. Maybe this woman was that old. Her tree looked slightly darker, but with all the changes happening, Sage wondered if her own mark would darken too. Before she could really take a good look at the patterns surrounding the special mark on her wrist, the woman barked, "Sit! Wait! I'll be finished in a moment." Not exactly the warm and fuzzy welcome that Sage had been hoping for. Mark had always been the most gregarious of guys, even as the director of operations. This, the grandest of high poobahs in the A.S.E.T. Phoenix office. He was as cheerful and welcoming to anyone who crossed his path. Maybe Sage should have taken him up on the offer to work there. The vibe she was getting at the moment was neither happy nor welcoming. Still, this was all new, and she'd made it this far, so it was time to see if she could get the answers that were promised. We had some trouble with the vampires that helped sway her decision to come in, Gray responded and took his seat. They're still pretty riled up, might need to send some peacekeepers. Sage followed his lead and took the remaining chair, wondering what trouble Gray was referring to. She'd only met one vampire, but his words implied more. Understatement of the century, Maddox, the woman replied with annoyance. They're out for vengeance. I've got I've got reports of vampires and shades openly attacking patrols together. Thanks to last week's little kerfuffle, we've got the beginnings of a line being drawn in the sand. Her fingers nimbly clacked away at the keyboard while she spoke. The words might have been chosen to make it sound less threatening, but the meaning came through loud and clear. Sides being picked for battles, vampires, shades. Sage had yet to learn which sides were which at that point. She turned to Gray, wanting to ask what was going on, but held her tongue. Getting answers out of him had already proven to be as hard as pulling vampire teeth. Word on the street is they're looking for something, he casually said. Do we know what that something is, Mr. Maddox? The woman's response came as sharp as the blades hanging on the wall behind her. Gray's eyes said yes, but when he spoke, his casual tone didn't betray the lie. If I knew, I wouldn't have called it something. I have ethereal factions breathing down my neck, new recruits to locate and retrieve, and let's not forget budget and maintenance for this building. Don't bother me with somethings. It's your job to know. Do your damn job. Even as she reprimanded him, the woman kept her eyes locked on the computer screen. Gray didn't seem to be bothered by it. Not surprising. Given the abrasive attitude he'd displayed with Sage, she expected he was used to getting it back in spades from upper management. He sat casually in the chair, his fingers toying with the grip of a blade sheathed in his belt. A sword, by the length of it, but short enough that she hadn't noticed it before under his leather coat. A dagger, perhaps? The longer she sat, the more she regretted coming in. She expected some kind of welcome, or at the very least acknowledgement of her being in the room, but for all the attention she'd gotten, Sage might as well have been one of the ornamental weapons hanging on the wall. She let out a sigh loud enough to remind them of her presence. Do you have any training? The woman finally asked. Sage stood and looked down over the top of her computer to meet the face of her would-be new boss. Hi, I'm Sage. Those turquoise eyes glared up at her angrily. I know who you are. I'm looking at your file. What training do you have? Weapons? Martial arts? Everyone in the Las Vegas office had the same brick wall mentality when it came to conversations, it seemed. Sage took a breath and plastered a sweet smile across her face as she replied, I'm sorry, what's your name? Scowling in response, the woman tapped the end of her pen on a nameplate at the edge of her desk. Director Ava Masters. Training? I take mixed martial arts twice a week, Sage responded in her best saccharine tone, and my mother taught me how to use a knife. No training. Ava all but rolled her eyes as she shoved a pencil into a tightly knotted bun at the top of her head for safekeeping. I just said, you take classes, honey, and you've played with knives. That's not training, Ava replied. Another newbie to be coddled, just what I needed on my plate. Sorry to disappoint you, Sage threw the same snarky tone back at Ava. Training wheels, dear. To her surprise, Ava stood, and a smile replaced her scowl. Though at the moment Sage spotted it, she knew that it wasn't genuine. You're grounded to the premises until we get you adequately brought to speed. Wait! I have a life. My apartment. Had. Ava cut her off. We'll assist you in closing your affairs. You can't do that. That's kidnapping. Ava pressed a button on her phone. Rena, I need you to start processing Sage Cynwrig's paperwork. A moment of silence held the room in thrall before a tiny voice over the speaker replied, Yes, Miss Masters. And just as quickly, Ava returned her commanding glare to Sage, waggling a finger of disappointment as she continued her lecture. You're far from a child. I'm sure Gray's already warned you what's out there. With the vampires and shade factions threatening war, I have terrors with nearly a century of experience being taken out. Daily. I can't afford to watch out for one little girl who misses her boyfriend. That's not fair. My mother had a life and a home, and your mother, ancient as she was, lost her light to exactly the same type of creature you ran into. She's a darkling now. You want to join her? Ava's words hit her like a slap to the face. Mark had said her mother was dead, that her plane had gone down in the Atlantic. No one had said anything about darklings. Sage opened her mouth to speak, but words failed to come. Tears, however, screamed with anguish as they leaked unchecked from the corners of her eyes. I'm sorry to be so blunt, but that's the fact. You're important, untrained as you are, and I'm not risking the safety of anyone under my command. You'll have to put aside your old life for the time being and learn your job quickly. Understood? Ava didn't wait for her to answer. Not that Sage could have summoned her voice if she wanted to. Miranda might still be out there, as a darkling, whatever the hell that truly was. Why wouldn't Mark tell her the truth? And to hear it from such a cold, unfeeling woman, it was like hearing she died all over again with all the pain that accompanied it. A few more keystrokes and the printer came to life. Ava whipped out a document and handed it to Gray. Take her to quarters and see she's introduced to the trainer. So that's chapter 13, but like I said, I want to do a little extra because these two chapters really, really, really go together. So we're going to move right on to chapter 14. Just like that, Sage had suddenly found herself drafted into the magical police force without so much as a signing bonus. Come to think of it, she hadn't signed for anything at all. How was it that she found herself at the doorway to a dorm with a slip of paper telling her she was assigned to bunk number 4? With her phone dead, she couldn't even call her friend or reach out to Mark as a lifeline. This wasn't her home. She felt neither welcome nor sense of belonging here. Aside from a stupid mark on her wrist, she had nothing in common with these people she'd met. And that Ava woman? Oh, she had a serious stick up her ass. She didn't need kid gloves, but a little compassion, given the circumstances, might have helped smooth the transition along. Sage reached to the necklace her mother had given her and gently caressed the silver trunk of the tree, tracing the thin branches with her fingertips. She was a Cynwrig. What would her mother have told her? You are not ready for the darkness of this world, but you must find strength in the days to come. Find the light within yourself and allow it to illuminate your future. Remember that true strength comes from determination. Defeat is not an option. Though it was far from ideal, Sage had to give this new reality a try. If for nothing else, to honor the memory of her mother. She'd worked for A.S.S.E.T, so there had to be some good here. 2 bunk beds were pressed against the end wall, with a tall chest of drawers separating them. Each drawer bore a number matching the associated bed. She'd been assigned to number 4, lower bunk, bottom drawer. At least she wouldn't have to climb over anyone when it came to sleep. Despite being on the top floor of the building, the room had no window, and the only light came from a fluorescent lamp above. Its harsh and unforgiving glow really set the feel for how her life would be in this facility. So much for fantasy. But maybe that was the point. Admittedly, she wasn't ready to face the truth of all that magic could be. Cold, drab, and ordinary might actually be a relief at the end of the day. You ready yet? Gray knocked on the door but kept his distance. We're due in the training hall. She hadn't realized how long she'd been standing in that room. He'd told her to drop her things and be ready. That must have been a while ago. I've got nothing to train in, remember? Newbies, Gray groaned and pointed to the drawer. Suit up. She didn't see him retreat, but heard his footsteps as he wandered down the hallway. Drab gray shorts and a matching t-shirt. If only she'd been allowed to pack a bag before they left. As much time as she spent in the gym, half her closet and dresser at home were activewear. The other options in the drawer looked like some kind of a space-age jumpsuit. She'd save that for later. When Gray returned, he crooked a finger and started walking away. She followed silently in his wake as he gave her the dime tour of the facility. The upper floor was agent level. Training halls, sleeping quarters, cafeteria, laundry, infirmary, and computer stations. There were other levels to the building, but when she asked, Gray evaded as usual, saying that it was need-to-know info. And of course, she didn't need to know just yet. She remembered prisoners being brought into A.S.S.E.T building back in Phoenix, and suspected that they had a space dedicated to prisoners here as well. Not a place she wanted to see, at least not now anyways. Gray led her down the hallway and through another until they came to a large space with padded floors that reeked with sweat. Excuse me, and the and the faint traces of blood. Punching bags had been hung from ceilings in the back corner of the room. One wall had been entirely dedicated to mirrors, and along another wall was a line of benches next to cubbies filled with various sparring equipment. "Welcome to the non-lethal training room," Grace smiled. "Try not to die in here." "Your confidence is so endearing," Sage retorted, hoping to have a chance to knock that stupid hat off his head before the day was over. "Careful now. Someone might think you actually care about me." "She's all yours, Dev," Grace shouted to the seemingly empty room. "Miss Sage, we meet again." Devon appeared, as if blinking into existence, startling her with his sudden proximity. "Where did you—" she started to ask, but realized she didn't need an answer. Her kind were the ones with negligent powers. Materializing out of thin air was more than she would ever be able to do, which of course meant that Devon was some kind of other. "Told you I knew you were special. I don't let just anyone into my gym." Devon gave her a hug, throwing his massive arms around her so tightly she thought she might pop. Finally, a familiar face, though he was undoubtedly going to kick her ass during their sessions together. Tough as nails, Devon held nothing back. Brutal honesty was his manner, and that instilled a sense of trust that Sage knew that she could count on. Smiling for the first time since she'd arrived, Sage pulled back to meet her trainer's eyes. "So you're, His were not the turquoise that she'd become accustomed to understanding was a trait of her people, nor were his the icy blue of the vampires she'd had a run-in with. Devon's were a silvery gray. Not a Terra. She didn't know what to call him. Words had been thrown around since she'd arrived, none really making sense. Shades and ethereals sounded magical, but she had no real idea what they signified. "Oh no, I'm no Terra," Devon snickered, as if privy to an inside joke. "I'm not special like you, but I'm on your side." "But also not a human either?" she asked. Devon and Gray exchanged sideways glances. "She hasn't been briefed." Gray shook his head. "They skipped orientation," Sage replied snarkily. Devon rose to his full height, cracking his knuckles and flexing his muscles as he towered over Sage. "I'm what you might think of as an ogre." He hadn't used magic, not that it should have any effect on Sage, being a Terra, but with just those subtle movements, she could have sworn Devon had doubled in size. Short as she was, looking up gave her a neck ache, but she stepped back a pace to get a really good look at him. Ogres were supposed to be big, ugly things. Well, at least that's what she'd come to expect from all the RPGs. They were meat shields because of their size, but that was gamer stuff. He had said it with no sense of humor, as if proud to have used the term. "But you don't look ugly," Devon snarled at her. "Why would I?" "I didn't say that. You did." "You didn't have to. I could see it in your eyes the moment I said it." "I guess I just thought, movies and games, there's sort of a character type." "Propaganda," Devon scoffed. "My people are cunning fighters. We're the masters of warfare." He beat his chest proudly. It was all she could do to keep a straight face. Some stereotypes did fit. "This whole supernatural other lives thing, it's a bit crazy town. You don't look like—" "Did you expect to see some big burly green monster?" he asked. "Yeah, I guess," she replied honestly. "I mean, where's the magic? The otherness?" That earned a smile from Devon. "You're not ready for the scary shit yet." "Well, it might make this whole thing more believable. Rip the Band-Aid off, as Matt would say." Sage sighed, but failed to release her tension. "I mean, how am I supposed to just know someone special when everyone I've met, apart from my troll boss, has looked like an everyday Joe?" "It gets better." Devon exchanged another sidelong glance with Gray. "But you really need to prepare yourself, or you might just go mad the first time you meet an ethereal." She was about to ask what that was, but Gray cleared his throat. "I need to get going. You got her?" "She's in good hands," Devon replied. Magic wasn't supposed to work on her, but Sage suddenly felt herself feeling infinitely better about things once Gray left the room. She turned on her trainer, asking again, "So how am I supposed to know who is what around here? Everyone looks so normal." "Enjoy the normalcy. It's the ones you meet out there that will surprise you." That seemed to amuse him. Maybe she was just so used to seeing the unusual that she'd never recognized the differences. More questions with no answers, par for the course around here. Did you know when you met me? I saw your mark. Devon pointed to her arm. A dead giveaway. Sage moved her right hand instinctively to cover her wrist. That's why I agreed to train you. Some of us have glamours, keep humans from seeing our true selves. You Terras with your birthmark are like a walking billboard. Wait, so that's why I was seeing my boss turn into a troll? Glamour? Devon snorted. But that was a shock, wasn't it? I might have screamed like a little girl. You are a little girl, and we need to work on that. He pointed to the map, which is why you train with me. No mercy. We need to get you in fighting form before you're sent out to battle. Wait, battle? Are we at war? Figure of speech. Your people are, for lack of a better word, the enforcers of law, which at times requires a bit of force to be applied. So you're going to teach me how to kick magical butt? I'm cool with that. Sage sank into a ready position. How about we learn how not to get your non-magical butt kicked first? He assumed a defensive position. You'll be up against people who are accustomed to using their magic. Since it has no effect on you, that levels the playing field some, but it doesn't stop them from being able to drop your scrawny butt. Brutal honesty. At least she knew that it came from a place of good. Devon inspired trust, where Gray had just been an asshole, picking on her innocence. So, do all creatures have special powers? Sage kept her hips loose, ready to move in either direction, expecting one of Devon's meaty fists to come slamming at her at any moment. Creatures? He threw an easy swing at her. What are we, pets or something? She deflected his fist across her body. I don't know. What's the proper word, okay? Cut me some slack. His next strike came low. Be respectful when you speak to us. There are many races within our realm. So each one has a unique... She avoided his foot, sweeping her legs, and hopped backwards. Abilities? Gifts? Better, Devon smiled. Compliments from him were few, and distracted by his quick approval, she dropped her guard long enough to allow him to get in one nasty blow. The wind escaped her lungs as she collided with the padded ground, but knowing that he'd be on her in a second, Sage blindly rolled to her left as she fought to regain her breath. Some of our kind have active powers, and some are passive. You, for instance? He didn't pursue as she retreated from his last attack. Completely passive, which is why you need to be able to fight. I'm magic neutral, she panted as she backed up to the far wall. Not passive. Could have fooled me. Devon stood at the center of the room, arms crossed, clearly unimpressed by her retreat. You are not able to absorb or use magic, which means you can't be fooled by it. But what you lack in active magic, you can make up for in skill, if you ever gain any. She finally gained control of her breath. And your powers? The patience of a god? He tapped his foot impatiently. Her ribs ached as she stood. The fall had bruised more than her ego, but he'd warned her, no mercy. You can be affected by magic, right? Correct. Not that it will help you in a fight, Miss Neutral. He wasn't offering up any secrets, which meant he had some. She'd eventually have to discover them, but now was not the time. Trolls? Not the prettiest things among us, but they have a glamour for that. His stony expression faltered for a fraction of a second. Keen mind for numbers, though. Just don't piss him off. Terrible tempers. What else? Sage came forward again and reset into a fighting position, watching Devon's hands and looking for a sign of his next move. Devon smiled and relaxed, letting her arms unfold as he walked, creating a perimeter around her. You have your standard shifters, light on their feet. Excuse me. You have your standard shifters, light on his... I can do this. I don't know why I keep tripping over that sentence. Light feet, loose hips, ears like radars, listening for proximity. Sage paid attention, determined to stand her ground this time. He circled around her twice. Shape changers can morph into anything living and copy the physical identities of other people. Hybrids, like the werewolf, are able to change only into the animal form of the thing that cursed them. They're a kind of stolen magic. Same with vampires. They're humans infused with dark magic that alters them irreparably. They may have immortality, but it comes at a steep price. A hand landed lightly on her shoulders. Silver bullets and sunshine, she answered proudly, springing into action. She twisted to the side and took hold of his wrist, bringing it around with her. Yep, Devon replied, breaking her flimsy hold. With a practiced skill, he turned her momentum into his advantage, and before she knew it, he had her by the arm. Tweaking it with just the right amount of pressure, he crippled her. One wrong move and her wrist would snap. She screeched as she worked to maneuver into a spot where she could gain any kind of leverage. No mercy, Sage. Life or death. How do you get out? Every move she made, he countered, keeping in control while she remained in eye-watering pain. The more she struggled, the harder he pressed on her pressure points, so that she stopped struggling. She allowed herself to relax and submitted to his control. The moment she did, Devon's grip loosened as well. This is how you fight back, he asked. Giving up? She didn't respond, gauging the proximity of his body as she stood in place. No pain, no gain, she told herself, and threw her head back, hitting Devon in the jaw. The sharp sting shot through her skull, but his grip relaxed enough that she could pull away. Sage ran to the other side of the room, and as soon as she reached the wall, she turned and set herself for an attack. You can't always run from your problems, he taunted, rubbing the spot on his jaw where she'd struck him. Live to fight another day. That's victim's mentality. You'll never be an agent at that rate. No one asked if I wanted to be an agent, she replied. More victim's mentality. Quit that shit right now. You're part of a world very few are privy to. Be proud. Your people are regarded with the highest of reverence next to the damn gods. But, there's always a but. But I want to cry like a little baby because life is hard, Devon mocked her with his words. She'd expected to hear that from Gray. But he was right. She got dealt a hand she'd never expected, and rather than see the silver lining, she'd been focused on all the negatives. Sage crossed back towards him. You're right. I'm a goddamn superhero. Devon laughed so hard he snorted. I'll make you a deal. You shape up, I'll make you a cape. Purple, she demanded. What? My favorite color. She took the moment of confusion and came at him, fists flying for his jaw. Oh, and how about crushed velvet? He deflected, countering low to throw her off balance. You gonna be the plush wonder? Her ankle sagged as she twisted awkwardly and tumbled to the mats. More like roadkill. Devon's foot was already in motion when she looked up and narrowly missed the heel drilling down towards her stomach. She made for her feet as fast as she could, but Devon was almost on top of her. With his hulking form towering over her, she knew she had to topple the beast if she hoped to gain the upper hand. Captain Trainwreck, at your service. She threw the full weight of her body into his abdomen, the edge of her shoulder hitting the target of his belly button. He didn't go down, but she managed to knock him off balance enough to get in a single punch as he fought to stay standing. Enough for now, Devon held his hands up. You're definitely a train wreck, but I like that you're attempting to think on your feet. Knowing an opponent's center of balance will increase your chances of using leverage against them. Was that an actual compliment? Sage clutched her chest with an exaggerated gasp of shock. You haven't earned a gold star yet, but you've got promise. He smiled at her approvingly. Thinking on your feet will be key for you. Not every encounter will be a physical one, but when backs are to the wall, you're up against someone who's using magic to do their battles, they will come at you hard and fast, physically. So, do we get weapons? Sage had pulled an impressive assortment from the boxes that had belonged to her mother, throwing daggers and knives of all sorts. She could do some damage if given a bit of a refresher with those. And that thought excited her more than it probably should have. If you know how to use what you have right here, he grabbed a hold of her hands and shook them for effect. Then you don't need to worry about the other weapons. I'd still feel safer with something sharp and pointy. She pulled away from him. Devon narrowed his eyes, sizing her up. A sharp mind trumps a pointy object any day. When you come up against elementals, that's the only weapon that will work. Ellie what nows? More words she had yet to truly learn the meaning of. People around this place seemed to enjoy throwing around terms that sounded ominous and broad. Special people whose magic works on physical objects. The general classification is elemental. But you said magic doesn't work on me. You may not be able to be hurt by magic, but that neutrality doesn't always extend to the items you hold. Devon nodded towards some benches. Take a seat. I'm going to give you some reading material. Oh, we have study guides? Sage snickered as she started walking. Yeah, we do. Pretty smart, huh? Maybe open with that next time, she suggested with as much snark as she could muster. Wait, so does that mean there's going to be a test? Devon disappeared through a doorway that she'd never have known was there if she hadn't seen him open it, which made her wonder what other secret passages might be right in front of her nose. And if there were secret passages, it would stand to reason that there were hidden rooms and cameras. She might well be being watched at that very moment. She slowly turned around, taking stock of the room with new wonder. Her eyes landed on the mirrors. Typical for most gyms, but this wasn't a typical gym. Instinct said she was being watched and probably graded, and her stomach churned with anxiety. Devon returned with spiral-bound books in hand. First thing you have to remember about magical others is that we're neither good nor evil. We're individuals. He handed over the small stack of books. These will give you some basics on the most common of our kind that you might run into, and how they're classed. And what am I supposed to do when I run into him? She asked, still unsure of exactly what her role would be. That will be based on individual assignments when you're ready. Devon looked down his nose at her. And based on today's performance, you've got a ways to go. So let's not worry about that for now. He must have sensed her low mood because his tone softened as he put a hand on her shoulder. We all have to start somewhere. You just got dropped into a world you didn't know existed. Kind of surprised you're acting as cool about it as you are. You'd be the first. Everyone else that I talk to expects me to just roll with the punches. Of course they do. Keeps you from being allowed to feel the sheer size of things. Management needs good little soldiers, not people who are freaking out and causing a scene. You don't care? Sage asked. I'm not management, just the hired help. He winked at her. So you don't live here? You've seen my gym. I have my own business. I help out here as a favor to the organization. Why? Because I believe they do good for the world. But I thought you just said it's about balance and not good or evil. Balance is good for everyone. Too much evil leads to death and corruption in all aspects of life. And too much good, she asked, makes people complacent and easy to manipulate. I'm the one feeling manipulated here, Sage sighed, feeling the eyes watching her on her back, wondering if Gray or maybe Ava was behind the mirrors grading her. You are, for the moment, Devon replied with his usual blunt honesty. But once you're more familiar with things, it'll make sense. Trust me. Sage hugged the new books close to her chest as she stood to leave. Study up, get some sleep. You and me, first thing in the morning. You want that superhero cape? You better be ready to bring it. So that is chapter 14. And now you know where Captain Trainwreck comes from, which is her little moniker that she uses, and is definitely a good representation of how Sage just is in general. She is definitely a train wreck. She can do lots of damage, and you can't tear your eyes away when she's in action. So what did we think of this week's episode, everybody? Did you guys enjoy having the extra 2 chapters today? Let's go to the chat box here and see what's going on. Or is it 1 minute late and you're 2 pages? Oh, I guess I did start a little bit early. I'm sorry. Again, daylight savings time has me completely screwed up. Slaying the keys on a laptop. Yep. Book time. Yeah, I did see while I was reading there was a little bit of a lag today and the screen blacked out for a minute. So I'm hoping when I watch the replay on this that not too much was missed. Crossed fingers. We'll see. If it's too bad, I'll just re-record it so that I can post it out. Because I want to make sure that everybody who is following is able to catch all of it and not miss any parts. So I will watch it again later. And if it's bad, if the recording didn't do so good, I will re-record it and post that up. Also, for you guys who are watching, remember, the entire month of November, we are doing the Bring a Friend contest. So whoever's here right now, please post it in the comments. Who brought you? That will enter their name in. The person who has the most names entered throughout the month is going to win our shiny new bookmarks. So if you're entering the name of somebody who brought you, that doesn't mean you can't participate. Invite somebody so they can tag you and you can get your name on the board. So I'll be going through the comments here to see whose names are listed, and I will tally those up. And each week as we do another reading, I'm going to let you know who's currently in the lead, so you know who you have to beat in order to get those bookmarks. Let's see what else. Las Vegas, I don't know what that's in reference to. The trainer. Yes, I love Devin. He's one of my favorite characters. I say that about all of them. They're all my children. But Devin is a really good character because he provides her with blunt honesty. He doesn't sugarcoat anything. He gives it to her as plain as possible so that she has a kind of a touchstone between the world she lived in and the world she's in now as she's getting used to it. And whereas Gray comes in just cocky and arrogant and just a total jerk, his words don't hit the same way that Devin's does. Devin can come through and tell her something that she might not want to hear, but she knows that he's coming from a place of honesty. He's not just being a jerk. And so she can take it a lot easier and she can understand it, even if it's something she doesn't want to hear. Put it on a... Wait, what am I putting on a poster? Thank goodness nobody... What? These comments I don't get. Crazy Town. That is one of my favorites too. If I'm assuming Facebook user is who I think it is Mr. Brian Tan, yes, I imagine Brian in that role. And when I do eventually get this made into an audiobook, I want Brian there to voice Devin for me, because I think he would do it really well. That's not magic. Gray's just a jerk. Oh, he is. He's such a jerk. I wanted to say hero instead of a jerk. How about Herc? Oh, we got a new face. Welcome, welcome. Thanks for listening. And remember, post who brought you so we can get their name up on the board. And let's see what else we got. Think on your feet. Yeah, and she's tripping. Exactly. Fire elementals can raise the temperature of the air in your lungs. That's not going to be fun. Yes, but that wouldn't affect Sage. She is 100% magically neutral. No magic can touch her, which makes things very interesting for her. And as a writer, it makes things very interesting for me, because as I went to write further books in the series, I would catch myself in the problem I created by the fact that magic cannot trick her, cannot affect her. So I have to come up with workarounds for how things can be happening that Sage might not see at the moment or might not catch, but can't be magic that does it, because magic would not affect her as it would affect anybody else. So that became a trap that I found specifically in the end of book 2 and the beginning of book 3 really, really caused some problems for me in writing that I had to figure out. And there are scenes I had to completely rewrite because of it, because as I was going through and reading, I was like, wait a minute, that breaks a rule. Shit. And we can't break our rules when we create magical systems, because if we break that continuity, we break the reader's trust. So there was a lot of things I had to rework, and a lot of things as I'm writing the next book, I'm still having to consider because of that rule, that magic cannot affect her, or any terror for that matter. Yay! I love when you guys love reading with me. Yep, that's me. I'm assuming this has got to be Brian. I wish it would show me your name. I don't know why it's not picking it up. He's testing the Devin voice. When I came to Brian and gave him the idea that I was going to possibly make this into an audiobook, which I still really want to do, but I want to get the individual voices down perfect. I told him that he was my Devin, and that the voice is similar to a mix of Samuel L. Jackson and Obi-Wan Kenobi. So if you can just imagine that in your head, that's how I'm picturing Devin, and that's how I pictured him when I wrote him too. Oh, I think we're at the end of the comments here. All right, so I'm not seeing any names right now. So again, remember the contest. You got to post the name during the live chat here so that I can put it on the board. So if your name isn't posted for this week, you're not being counted for this week. And let's see, we ran a little bit over today. We're actually at 40 minutes. I'm not going to do longer readings like this all the time, but I thought it was a special treat since we are, in a new month and we're running a contest, and those chapters really did go together. I figured I would put them both together, but I won't always run 2 chapters together. We are getting to some really, really, really good scenes. I cannot wait. I spent last week re-editing the book because I was made aware of some changes that really needed to be made, because the editor who I'd had on that book somehow missed these things. And because I want to make sure I've got good quality for you guys, I have been working to go through my books, and I'll be going through my entire backlog, which is 20 plus books. So it's going to take me a little while to do, but I've been re-editing, re-correcting, and re-uploading. So if you have bought the book before, make sure that you go back to the retailer that you bought it from and request to download the new version of book 1 and book 2. Those are currently re-edited at the moment. They do not do it automatically. I found that out after I had uploaded it, that they will not notify you. You have to request it. So if you did buy the book from Apple, if you bought the book from Amazon or Nook or wherever, re-request the new copy of book 1 and book 2. Those have been edited. I'm working on getting book 3 and 4 re-edited, and I will let you know when that happens, because I want you guys to have the best quality version of the book possible. And if you do notice something wrong with the book, feel free to message me and let me know, because I keep a list of things that need to be corrected, and I will do these periodic corrections, because again, my goal is to make the book best as it can possibly be for you. So with that said, let's see what we got here. Brian can nail that. It's Lord Brian, Duke of Tan. All right, I like that. We're going to have to put that on a t-shirt for you. All right, guys, we are at the end. I will see you next week. Remember, this is an especially testing week for all of us, so take some time, do something to make yourself happy, try and de-stress in whatever way you can, and I will see you next Sunday with another chapter. Thank you so much for watching. I love you guys.